I know you're listening. You're here because something isn't right. Something feels twisted, upside down. Things don't add up. Hello, human. Welcome to our twisted universe. In this episode, we speak with Dave Hodrien. Dave is the chairman and lead investigator for Birmingham UFO Group and the United Kingdom Deputy Representative for the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. He regularly writes for UFO Truth Magazine and has previously written for a number of other magazines. He has spoken at many well-known conferences and even given educational classes on UFO investigation. He has appeared on television and radio numerous times and has even designed a UFO-themed card game.
Hi, and welcome to our Twisted Universe. Today we're going to be talking to David Hodrien. He is a UFO investigator and he has a group called UFO Investigations. Hi, David.
Hello, how you doing?
Good.
Lovely.
How's it going over there?
Great, yeah.
We got a little bit of a time.
We've had an amazingly, really warm day, which is why I'm in my Hawaii-style shirt here. Yes, we've got really hot weather going on at the moment, so quite similar to the States, I'd imagine. But usually it's a lot more cloudy and drab across here. But,
you need the sun.
Yes, absolutely.
That sounds wonderful. So we're so excited to have you today. We were wondering, how did you get started in the UFO business?
Yeah. So I've always had an interest in the world of the paranormal since quite an early age. Just always been fascinated by just unsolved mysteries around the world. And back in childhood, I just remember thinking there's got to be something to all this. It can't just be all just fabricated stories and that sort of thing. And the more I started to look into things, I think in my early teens I started to get more of a fix on the UFO side. It became particularly fascinating to me. Started to read lots and lots of cases. And I just thought there's just so much evidence on record for the reality of this thing. It's just so widespread and there's just so many cases that are on record. And when I was 16, started going to UFO conferences, and that was the first time I saw people actively discussing the subject, people on the front lines, essentially investigating it, and direct witnesses, of course. And that just cemented the reality of the subject even further for me. It was quite a number of years went by, really, where I just had a big interest in the subject. I was buying UFO magazine, the most well-known UFO publication worldwide while it was going, and that's how it was, really. But in late 2007, Birmingham UFO Group started. So I live in Solihull, just south of Birmingham, and it was really up until that point there was a UFO Midlands UFORM. But they were kind of out of the way, a bit too far to drive to, really. Whereas this new group starting up was in the centre of my city, and I thought, this is brilliant. I can go along there, meet up with other people who've got an interest in the subject. So I was one of the first members to sign up with Birmingham UFO Group. At the time, the chairman of Birmingham UFO Group, a couple of guys called Craig and Mark. It wasn't long before they found that I had a very, very big kind of passion for the subject and a drive for it, and a lot of information on it. And they decided to take me on as the official investigator for Birmingham UFO Group. And that's where my investigation work commenced in early 2008. And wow. About a year and a half later, they also handed over the running of the group to me. So around 2009. I took over chairman responsibilities for the group and continued to be the lead investigator for it as well.
Wow!
And it's been that way ever since. So we've had monthly meetings in North Birmingham. Obviously, they were down for a couple of years due to but last September got them started up again, which was really brilliant. Got the community back together. There's not that many UFO groups in the UK who are actively doing that and actively having regular meetings. I can probably count them on two hands, really. There's a lot more groups in America. The subject's a lot more open. Many of the groups in the UK, they might collect data and collect case information, but they're not really doing live meetings and kind of get-togethers. And for me, the community aspect has always been a big part of it. It's really fun running the meetings, getting speakers in to talk and this sort of thing. So I've been actively investigating the subject now for about 15 years.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Do any of the little towns around there, do they do like conventions or anything?
Yeah, there's a few conventions that go on. One of the main ones, UFO Truth Magazine conference up in Holmfirth in Yorkshire. The gentleman who ran that is Gary Heseltine, well-known ufologist from here in the UK. And he's actually stopped that conference now, but the magazine is still ongoing, and I write regularly. I'm a regular columnist for UFO Truth Magazine, so it's an e-zine, so it's a downloadable one rather than a physical publication, as is how it is these days in a lot of cases. And yes, I'm actively writing for that as well. So it takes up a bit of my time, but I've also got family life and other interests and things going on.
Wow.
Trying to balance it all the time.
They're well-written articles. I came across your article, and that's how we ended up connecting. Yeah, you're really talented, and it's interesting. I love the way you write. It's kind of a fun read also.
Yeah, I tried to. I'm kind of light-hearted with it, and I see the fun side of the subject, while at the same time how serious it is. And it's important to remember that. But it's fascinating. It's endlessly fascinating to me. And just speaking with people and being on the front line of it and talking with people who've had experiences. Now, I've had a couple of things happen to me through my life, a couple of ghost type experiences. I had a UFO sighting back in 2009, actually in a well-known UFO hotspot. And it was on a UFO Skywatch. I can't argue with that. It happened. And I've also had an out-of-body experience as well in my teenage years.
You want to share that with us? I mean, that sounds really interesting.
Which sorry.
Both?
All of it. Yeah. Sure, yeah. So my UFO sighting. So for many years, I believed in the reality of the subject, and it's my belief. So a lot of people sort of say, I'll only believe something when I see it with my own eyes. Yeah. Well, I think genuinely the amount of evidence on record is enough to convince anybody of the reality of it. You've just got to start delving into some of the bigger cases on record, and you'll soon see the truth behind this subject. But so for many years, I already believed in the reality of the subject, as in, by reality, I mean that I believe it involves other non-human intelligences, which I think are very likely to be extraterrestrial in origin, but obviously there's different viewpoints on those sort of things. Sorry, I lost track where we were now.
You were talking about your actual sighting at a UFO Watch.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So back in 2009, I was down at a conference in Warminster, which is down in Wiltshire, which is where a lot of the crop formations are still appearing today. And a lot of those are kind of art projects, known art projects, but I think that there is some links between crop circles and the UFO enigma, but exactly what those links are is part of the mystery, isn't it? But it was down there for a weekend-long conference, and halfway through that conference, they'd arranged a skywatch on Cradle Hill, which is just north of the town, and there were loads of people turned up for it. And it got to about 11:30 at night, and by that point, a lot of people had gone back to their hotels and things. And it was, really, really lovely, clear night sky. Beautiful, all the stars out. Very, very good place for sky watching. And all of a sudden, somebody calls out, "Oh, there's a jet coming in." And we looked to the south, and sure enough, there's this dark object, looks about the size of a small aircraft at least, with a singular white light on it. And as it gets near, all of a sudden, this white light kind of flares up really, really bright. Stays lit on it for a couple of seconds, not like a strobe that will go on off. It's just like up like this, and everybody's like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" It dies back down again, and then there's this small turquoisey light. It's kind of halfway between green and blue, not like the normal lime green that you get on aircraft. So every few seconds, this white light's coming up like this, and it's coming in. And as it gets nearer, we realise it's completely and utterly silent. Well, this thing could have only been about several hundred feet in the air. I was keeping my eye on it. I was like trying to get in all the detail that I could from it. Sadly, nobody had a decent night vision scope on them, myself included, so we couldn't get an accurate look at the shape of whatever this was, but it was quite sizable. and it was completely silent. And it came in over the hill and performed an arc and then went away into the distance. And I interviewed numerous people who'd been up there that night and had the sighting. And I looked into it, and the lighting configuration didn't match any known civilian or military aircraft or drone. Let's say it was a hoax, because we never saw the occupants. Could have been a hoax. Not saying it was definitely alien, but if it was a hoax, it was a very good one, because it was large and it was flying completely silently. So there were people around the town who knew the Skywatch was on, so I can't completely exclude that as a possibility. But it was still interesting. It was unidentified to this day, so therefore UFO.
When the UFOs glow and they get the brighter light, we call that a power up.
Yes.
I mean, how much energy would it take to produce that much light?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with this one, it wasn't like the whole object was glowing. Obviously, with some sightings, the entire object itself is glowing. This was definitely a large object with numerous lights on it. So it was a white light on it. But obviously, you'd expect to see the normal navigation lights of a plane, red, green, white, etc., flashing straight.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, and it didn't seem to match any military drone either, at least none that we're aware of. Could have been some sort of black project thing, maybe, but yeah, I mean, that's it. That's the mystery of it, isn't it? So, I'm not saying that every single UFO that is seen is alien in origin, of course. I think that some are probably human-flown things, maybe even back-engineered things, and then other ones are going to be black projects. And of course, many, many sightings are, of course, misidentification of mundane objects. And I'm quite happy to tell people when I think that they've seen something mundane. And they don't always believe it, even though I've looked at so many cases over the years, and they're kind of adamant. No, it's definitely a spacecraft. And so we still get Chinese lanterns. They're still seen from time to time. There's actually a lot less these days because of the fire risk. Sort of stopped selling them, at least here in the UK. You can't buy them in shops anymore. You can still get them online, I think, though. So somebody will still launch them at New Year and Christmas and this, but they're very few in number these days. Back when I started this, back in 2008, 2009, they were all the rage. So people were seeing entire streams of these things going across the sky. And if they didn't know what they were looking at, they were like, wow, it's a fleet of spacecraft or whatever. Yeah, you have to, but I'm not saying that every single orange orb seen is a Chinese lantern. Of course not. I've dealt with some cases where they've performed incredible maneuvers, are clearly under intelligent control, but sometimes followed vehicles for miles and miles. Yeah, I mean, going back to my own experiences, so the ghost things that happened, it was, I'll keep it quite brief because obviously you want to cover some cases, but I was in a number of share houses at Plymouth University on the south coast. And one of those share houses, when I moved in, there were 3 other gents there and a girl as well. So it was quite a busy share house. And there were several incidents that happened in the house, moving objects and this sort of thing. There were some footsteps ran right across the living room ceiling, went right along the hall, and we went up there and there was no windows open, no burglar or anything. And it definitely wasn't an echo from next door, because we would have heard it again if that was the case. Only happened the once, but it was very definite, loud footsteps. Really, we were all just froze in our seats. and peeping around the door, so something dead quiet, horrible. We had this vase of fake flowers that was sitting on top of the television, and it moved down in front of the screen. We didn't see it happen, but we'd gone through to the adjoining kitchen, and when we come back in about sort of 5-10 seconds later, it was down in front of the TV screen by itself, and it's still standing up. And I was just like, it was almost like it was toying with us, trying things. And I'm absolutely certain that it wasn't like one of my flatmates, doing some sort of prank. So there was a few oddities went on with that. But no, again, nothing incredible. And I've dealt with a lot of paranormal experiences that are linked with contact cases. There's a definite crossover with the world of the paranormal. So many people I've spoken with who've had contact experiences involving ETs have also had ghost sightings in the house, shadow beings, orbs, that sort of thing. Very, very common indeed. My out-of-body experience was involuntary, and it happened when I was at the dentist. I was knocked out with the gas to get one of my teeth extracted. Now it's quite well known that people under anaesthetic will quite often have OBEs. That's regularly happening in hospitals. And I actually came out of or at least I think I came out of my physical body, I was in a standing up position and looking down over the dentist. I could see myself in the dentist chair with the dentist leaning over me like this, pulling my tooth out, and I was back at a diagonal from him. And when I came around from the gas, I remember very groggily saying to the dentist, I saw that. And he didn't know what I meant by that. And he said, you couldn't have because you were knocked out. So I didn't really I didn't know how to explain it. And that happened when I was about 14. And I didn't know back then that it was an out-of-body experience, but looking back on it, that's what it was. Yeah, interesting.
All these, everything that leads you up to where you are now. I mean, the unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's stuff going on out there, and actively investigating this subject, it's only cemented my viewpoint that this is very, very much real and going on a global level. And there's still many people out there that need to open their eyes to that. And I think the problem is with a lot of people, because it doesn't impact their own daily life, because they either haven't had experiences, or maybe they've had an experience, but then they've just kind of forgotten about it and moved on with their life, which sometimes happens, of course. Because there's no kind of direct ongoing impact, they'll just kind of dismiss it. And so there's a lot of people out there who'll fence it on the subject. So rather than being outwardly skeptical towards it, they're more sort of like, I don't really care whether it's real or not, because it's not really affecting me. This sort of viewpoint, and you get that quite a lot, especially in the UK. As people are getting more and more open to it, especially after what's happened in recent years in the States with the Pentagon emissions and the videos. I'm actually giving a talk next weekend down in Glastonbury at the Glastonbury Symposium conference on that very thing. I'm going to be talking about what's happened since 2017 with the announcements and what that means for the UFO subject.
The fuzzy Tic Tacs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think even though the videos aren't kind of crystal clear up close things, they are very, very much definitely real military videos of UFOs. And they're performing incredible maneuvers. And we're only seeing part of the picture. Of course, the main spokespeople in the Pentagon have come out of this. They're telling us it's not just those videos. We've got the videos, but they've captured it on other sensors and radar and things, and that information hasn't been. So looking at the videos alone, you could kind of dismiss them. And I know there's some skeptics out there who've tried to do just that. They've tried to come up with mundane explanations, but that's only part of the picture. I think that the Pentagon would have done a lot of analysis on that footage and the other information that they have, and the fact that they're saying yes, these things are definitely unidentified is very interesting indeed. But some people think
they're acknowledging
disinformation. It could be disinformation for black projects. That's entirely possible. So we always had to kind of maintain that sort of level with it, but I certainly think that what they've captured there and what took place with those incidents, like the now infamous USS Nimitz incident in 2004, I think it's absolutely spectacular. I think it's one of the best UFO cases on record.
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. That's the so that's the Tic Tac essentially. Yeah. So that's the case that's around the
oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the object that they saw. But that was seen by multiple pilots.
Gotcha.
Intercepted it and approached it and everything. And seeing the actual main pilot from that, David Fravor, has now gone on the record and is talking at conferences about it. And just seeing the way he talks about that incident, about what happened, is absolutely compelling to me that he's talking about a real experience and not fabricating it. So it's very, very impressive case.
I think we're about to have full disclosure soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed all the time. But the cover up is itself, and there is definitely a cover up. Absolutely a cover up. The issue with it is that there's all sorts of aspects of the subject that it's like opening a big can of worms. So, of course, these objects, they're not just flying around and in our skies, they're interacting, they're taking people from their homes, from their cars. And also they're manipulating our nuclear warheads, switching on and off nukes, and paying close attention to our military establishments around the world. And there's all sorts of aspects that they really wouldn't want to disclose. And I think that a lot of the public would be like, okay, stop them from doing it. And then they'd have to say, we can't. And They don't want to go down that route. So it's a very complex thing to cover up. So I mean, obviously, people these days are more open to the idea that that there could be extraterrestrial life. Absolutely. You know, there's most people now seeing the scope of the universe. Obviously, we had the photographs come out yesterday from the telescope, spectacular shots. And when you see the vastness of the universe, the likelihood that there's other intelligent life forms out there is ridiculously high, really, I would say. And most people believe that, but obviously it's very big. It's a very different thing believing in life out there to is their life right here interacting with us on a regular basis. That's the
is it coming to visit us?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I believe that answer is true.
Absolutely, yeah. The evidence I've seen. So yeah, it's just an endlessly fascinating subject, and I think if anybody gets into it and starts delving into the cases, they can't fail to be impressed. I managed to change my father from a complete skeptic in the subject into a complete believer in it. I took him along to a conference essentially. I just because earlier on in it, myself and my brother were very, very much into the subject and going along to conferences. And my father was like, "Oh, little green man," all this sort of thing. And we were like, "Come along and see. Come along with us to a conference, and I guarantee you'll be impressed." And my father's an intelligent man, and he came along, and within the space of a day, had a 180 flip, and he was like, "It's real." I was like, "Yeah."
And you're like, "Yes,
yeah,
I've accomplished."
Yeah, and he now comes along to our group meetings and everything, and it's very. And I see him trying to argue the case with my mum and try to convince her it's real and that sort of thing. But I think she's a bit spooked out by it all, really. It's obviously a lot of people, that's the reason why they don't want to delve into it. It's not because they don't entertain the idea of it being real. It's just there's so many aspects of it that are a bit creepy. If it
makes them unsettled to think about.
Exactly, yeah. Which is absolutely fine. I mean, it's far from normal as some of the things that are going on, and it's only through looking into case after case for many years that I've grown accustomed to what's taking place out there, and I'm also a realist, and I know that just the amount of people on the planet and the likelihood that would happen to me directly is pretty low. But yeah, I think I'd be interested. I'd like to hope I'd be interested rather than scared if it did.
It's a hard thing to accept too that that our best technology is nothing. It does nothing to stop them, or we're defenseless, and
absolutely.
So we're at their mercy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think I think what's happened with the military bases, with the shutdown, the infamous case at Malmstrom in '64, what's going on with that, it shows that if they wanted to, they could start World War III just like that. And we're lucky that they don't seem to have that mindset. They seem more, I would say, more interested. There seems to be an ongoing program where they're interacting with human beings on an ongoing basis. But I mean, that's delving into sort of deep aspects of the contact subject there. I mean, I could go off on a limb on that and we could stop talking about that for hours.
I've heard that there won't ever be any nuclear war because they wouldn't let it happen.
Yeah, I'd like to hope so. You've got the aspects of some contact cases where people are shown sort of environmental disasters and things, either as a direct message inside their brain or on a physical screen aboard the craft. So they seem to be warning some contactees of future events of destruction of our planet. Now, what we don't know is whether that's for their benefit or for our benefit, whether they kind of care about us as a species and don't want us to destroy our world, or whether they don't want us to destroy it because they're using it for various resources. So it could be looked at two different ways. And
Very well, good.
I haven't made up my mind as to which of those. Yeah, there's many unanswered questions with the subject even now, and that's what makes it continuously fascinating. Is there's still so many aspects that we need to kind of get definite answers on. Now, of course, there's some people out there who have been directly involved and have had actual contact experiences. The beings might have told them certain things, like they might have said, "We're from this particular star system," or "We're doing this because of this and this." And that's absolutely fine, and I don't mean to belittle anybody who's got those particular views, but at the same time, we don't know whether the beings themselves are being entirely truthful about that, or whether the beings themselves are saying something to cover for something else. So there's many levels to this, really.
Yeah.
right?
Craftier than us.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So Joe looked through your files and he picked out
Yes.
a few cases. Were there any ones that stand out for you that are
Sure.
interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we can go into. So actually, in talking about the my previous UFO sighting in 2009, I think we'll start with what happened on our recent Skywatch. So for a while, I'd stopped doing the Skywatches throughout the lockdown and everything. I didn't do Skywatches. I know it was outside and technically, but I'd closed down the monthly meetings. But once now those restarted, I decided earlier this year that it'd be good to start doing Skywatches again, organising Skywatches. So we're originally going to go to a place called Bar Beacon up in North Birmingham, really lovely hillside, lovely views of the sky. But it turned out that there was another group that were running a Skywatch on the same night. Now I know these guys. It's an Uprising UFO and Paranormal Investigation. They've got a very large Facebook community going, and lovely guys. The main chair people of that, Nath and Luna Lockley, they'd organised a Skywatch on the same night in Cannock Chase. Now Cannock Chase is a lovely area north of Birmingham, and it's widely known for paranormal type activity. There's been a number of big UFO incidents that have occurred there over the years. The most famous one is an incident involving a flying triangle that took place in the mid-90s there. That was a very famous big case involving lots of military witnesses, etc. There's also lots of ghost sightings that have been seen, and also other strange weirdness going on, werewolf sightings and all sorts of strangeness. Yeah, so
That's awesome.
seriously, there's all sorts of stuff going on around there. So it's a very good place to go for sky watching. Lots of nice clear views and sort of hilltops and things. So we'd arranged to go there. So we decided to combine forces, and we all headed out to Cannock Chase. Weather was so. It was a cloud-covered sky, unfortunately, so we couldn't see the stars or anything. But at least it didn't rain, and it was very, very still night. There was absolutely no wind at all, really. So we just met up at this car park about 8 o'clock. There's about 40 people turned up for it, so not a bad turnout. And we walked to this open area of grassland that was alongside where the car park was. The Skywatches we organised, they're kind of quite a social event. So it's not just randomly just hanging there with binoculars staring up at the sky for hours. Yeah, there's a lot of banter goes on. We've got snacks and drinks going. Uprising had done this really ginormous raffle with hundreds of prizes, and that just took out absolutely ages. They were just dishing out prizes for hours. Anyway, it got to about 10:30, and over half the people on the Skywatch, myself included, decided to go on a walk around the area. Now, there's 2 war cemeteries quite close to where we had the Skywatch, and we decided it'd be interesting to go and see the cemeteries after dark and walk around the edges of them and that sort of thing. And there'd actually been reported some ghost soldier sightings, so it wasn't just UFOs in the air. There was kind of potential ghost activity on the ground as well. So many of us set off on this walk, and the remaining people just stayed there in the field. And lo and behold, that's when sightings started to happen. Right when I wasn't there to see them, of course. So I actually only found out that there'd been anything seen the following day. Now, I don't know why, but some of the witnesses who were on the watch didn't mention it on the evening, and they were just chatting amongst themselves and that sort of thing. The sightings were quite brief. The first sighting came in from it's actually a lovely lady from Buxton, who's a contactee herself. Her abduction case I investigated many years ago. And she was out there on the watch, so we've kept in touch, and her and her husband were along for the watch. And she was one of the witnesses to one of these objects. But essentially what she said she saw is over the tree line to the southeast, she saw this orange orb of light suddenly appear in the sky and then descend on this very rapid arc down into the trees. Just a second, real quick sighting, bang, appears, and then it shoots down like this, and it's gone. By the time she's highlighted it to her husband, the object's disappeared. Now, she'd actually left the Skywatch. By the time we got back off the watch, she decided to head for home. So I only found out about this the following day. And around the same time, there was other sightings. But here's the interesting thing. They'd also seen an orange orb, yeah? So I was thinking at first, it's got to be the same object. But it turns out that there were other witnesses, including one of our other investigators, James Brodie, who writes for my group and writes some of the reports. So he was one of the witnesses, and they saw it off to the northeast. Yes, a completely different direction. And also, they said that it moved around erratically for several seconds. So they've seen this object do this in the air a bit and then just disappear. Now, obviously, completely different maneuvering and completely different direction. So it was either the same object had been across there and then moved and gone to the other place, or it was two separate things going on at roughly the same time with two objects of similar appearance. Now, the interesting thing with this one, of course, is straight away orange orbs. We talked about Chinese lanterns earlier on, didn't we, in the talk? And the thing with this is lanterns, as you know, would just drift very slowly across the sky. In high wind conditions, they might buff it around a little bit, but it was dead still. The trees weren't moving at all. So in those conditions, a lantern would either hover still in the air for ages and just kind of slowly drift. It wouldn't dive down to the ground extremely sharply. It wouldn't perform sharp erratic maneuvers and then vanish. So a lantern really doesn't fit this at all, because both the signs were quite fast, and it doesn't really fit a flare. Now, on one of our previous sky watches, strange enough, at Cannock Chase, but at a different location, somebody had actually done a flare. They brought it along to trick everybody out on the sky watch, and they set it off in the distance. Said, "Oh, look at that orange light over there," and it was obviously a flare. So it was descending very slowly for about 20 seconds before finally vanishing in the trees. And straight away, I was like, "Somebody's set a flare off." And this was nothing like that. Again, obviously, you've got the sharp arc and then the erratic maneuvers, neither of which fits with that. And it was also dead silent and still out there. And if there was somebody doing some sort of prank and shooting fireworks up, I think we probably would have heard them. There was nobody around. It was just really, really quiet around there in the middle of nowhere. And they would have also had to have gone from and then walked around a completely different location and done it a second time, all without being seen or heard at all. So none of the mundane explanations which I'd usually put down to such an experience really fitted. So essentially, UFO sightings occurred on our most recent Skywatch. Nothing fantastic or anything. They were just orange orbs of unexplained light, but interesting nonetheless.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
So we'll wait and see what happens on the next one. Yeah. Who knows? Sky's the limit now.
Right.
Don't leave while it's while you're on the
just
Skywatch.
stay put.
Yeah. Absolutely. Another case. Actually, this one. Yeah. Let's move on to a UFO crash case. So this is a whole different kettle of fish, and now we're going to get very impressive. And this case came to me last September. I was contacted by the key witness involved. I believe this to be a genuine UFO crash that's never gone on record before he reached out to me. So this is a really, really big deal. It involves a farmer from down Devon in South England, named Adrian Johns, who's absolutely fine with releasing his name, by the way. Anytime I mention anybody's name, it's because they've allowed me to. And back in 1996, he actually worked across in Venezuela. What happened was 20 years before that, in 1976, there was a farming crash at the time, and all the stocks were dropping and they were just losing loads of money. And he came across an advert in a magazine asking for a cattle farmer to move out to Venezuela and work out there in the jungles of Venezuela. And because of his lack of money and very few ties at the time, he decided to take them up on that offer. And he moved out there to Venezuela back in 76. He actually had another UFO sighting shortly after he arrived. Within about sort of 6 months of his arrival, he actually saw a multicolored glowing orb of light that shot across the sky one night. And I documented that case as well. But I'm not going to discuss that here. I'm going to discuss what happened in 1996 because it's far more impressive. So by this point, he was about 46 years old, I think. And he was the administrator of a ranch in the jungle of Venezuela called Corralito. A very, very large area of a cattle ranch. And the incident occurred between Christmas and New Year of that year, so very late December. Most of the staff had gone home for the Christmas holidays at that point. By the way, he sent me all his official ID badge and everything, so he's the real deal. So they were off the ranch. There was him, his brother-in-law, and a number of other cowboys had remained on the ranch to look after the cattle and keep it over the Christmas period. Now, what would happen is every single night they would go to lock up the outer gate of the ranch, and it was quite a distance because it's a large area, and it took about half an hour to drive to. So they're in the HQ in the center of the ranch, and they set off in a pickup truck. It's about 6 p.m. in the evening. There's him, his brother-in-law, and three cowboys in the back seat. So 5 of them set off in this pickup truck. They drive out to the gate. Now, he said it was very important to lock down because back then Venezuela, quite dodgy. Said there were kidnappings and things going on, so quite a dangerous area to be working in. So they had to make sure that everything was locked up. They had a little airstrip in the area of the ranch, but it had been shut down for the Christmas period, so they didn't expect any flights in or out. And the route to the gate took them past this airstrip. So they drive out to the gate, and by this point it's about 7 o'clock. They have a chat with the gate attendant there for a little bit, just have a drink with him and a chat, and then they make their way back in the pickup truck back down to the headquarters. So by now it's about 7:30 in the evening, and it's the sun's just sort of starting to set because of the time of year. It wasn't fully dark or anything, but it was quite low in the sky. Now, as they're coming towards the airstrip, all of a sudden there it is. Coming in from the east, moving on a westward direction. There's an object. It's what it described was a bright yellow, glowing cigar-shaped object with rounded ends, kind of almost like a tic tac. No cliche there. It had rounded ends, but longer than a tic tac, so more like a cigar. Brightly glowing yellow. He said it had at least one porthole or window that was white and round. You could see the central one. He said the brightness coming off it. He said there might have been other portholes in the thing that he couldn't really see. Now, you have to remember that they owned this airstrip, and they were well used to seeing aircraft in all flying conditions at all times of day and night. He said that this absolutely was not an aircraft. So obviously sometimes aircraft can reflect the sunlight and you can lose the definition of the wings and tail, and this wasn't that. This thing was only about 100 yards ahead of them. It was about 50 feet off the ground, so it's quite low down.
Wow.
And it was also flying at no more than 20 miles an hour, which is actually too slow for a plane to keep up in the air. So they were aware of all these aspects of it that didn't fit with it being an aircraft. So this object's just coming across like that, and they're all like, whoa, and they all get out in the pickup truck, so they're all standing there watching this thing ahead of them. Don't have any cameras on them, by the way. This is back in 96, so way before smartphones. So this object's moving across like this. Now, as it passes across the airstrip in front of them, all of a sudden it bursts into flame completely silently. And all of a sudden, it's still flying along the same direction, but it's now got flames billowing across its surface, and they're just watching it. And it heads off to the west over this area of thick jungle on the outskirts of the ranch, and they're watching it go, and it's moving away like this on fire. In the distance, he says he reckoned it was about sort of 2 or 3 miles away from them. There's a number of hills, so he thinks that it was slowly ascending as it went. But essentially they were watching it away, and they could see it still above the tree line. And all of a sudden, silently broke up into 3 or 4 chunks. And these chunks rained down into the jungle trees below, still on fire, these parts. Now, obviously, if that had been an explosion of something like a blimp or an aircraft, it would have made a very, very loud noise, especially if it was a blimp. There was no sound at all. So these bits just rained down into the trees. So, of course, they wanted to go out and check this out, but sadly, the area where these pieces had come down was very, very highly vegetated due to the time of year. So they get monsoons across there. So for periods of the year, there's just thick undergrowth. And where these parts of this, whatever it was, had come down, they couldn't literally drive out to that location. So instead, they returned back to the headquarters, and they're sitting there talking about what they've seen. There's nobody else on the ranch to tell or anything, just some of the other cowboys at the HQ, they tell them and everything, and they're having a big discussion about it. So you think maybe that's the end of the story, yeah? But it's not. So the following day they had the radio on, and all of a sudden there's a news report on the radio, and it reports that a plane to the southeast of their position on the previous day had had a close encounter with a glowing object, and they'd made an emergency landing at San Fernando. San Fernando is one of the larger towns, sort of southeast of Corralito. And this object had come closely by their plane, spooked the pilots enough that they made an emergency landing, and they said it was traveling on a northward course. So there was that came in. So it was going that sort of up northwards. Now, about a week later, after the new year, the other staff returned to the ranch, and they tell them about what had happened. Now, there's a village. I'm going to see if I can get this right. It's Gardatinijas. Very, very hard to say. It's a small village off to the east, west. Sorry, off to the west. I'm going to get it the right way around. Yeah, off to the west of Corralito, I think. No, sorry, I said it coming from the east, didn't I? Sorry, I'm just it's because it's backwards. Yeah, east of their position. Now, what they claim they saw, numerous villagers saw this object, a glowing object, come in from the south, a glowing cigar-shaped object, hover over the town, perform a right angle turn, and then head off to the west. That's right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting my east and the west. It's difficult. Yeah, so that's heading off to the west, and that was the direction of the ranch. So you've got these three different experiences by different independent witnesses. And what I believe that was is we were able to trace the track of this object. So they'd seen it go up north, move, and that headed off. Now, to get to the ranch, there was actually some hills between the village and the ranch airstrip. So essentially, and they said it was only about 50 foot off the ground. So they said that it must have maneuvered between those hills, otherwise it would have crashed. Either that or it made a sharp descent and they hadn't seen it and it had come down once it got to the hills. But let's say it had been at that. You said it would have had to have weaved in and out of the hills to avoid hitting the tops of them. So that implies intelligence. So even though it was moving on a straight course, it may well have made some intelligent maneuvers before that. So looking at all these aspects of it, about what happened and about the appearance of the object, the fact it was completely silent, doesn't fit with anything mundane at all. The only really two mundane things I thought that it could have been is either a blimp that had caught fire, but of course I mentioned the explosion would have been very loud, and also blimps generally look like that. And make a noise, and then you've got meteorites as well. Now, if you remember seeing the incredible bits of video footage from Russia where the meteorite went across the sky, well, first of all, they only last for several seconds as it crosses the entire skyline, and secondly, of course, a meteorite will have a big burning tail at the back of it. This thing had no trail behind it, no smoke or anything, even when it was on fire. So even when it was on fire, there was no smoke coming off it. It was just these flames going across the surface. Yeah. So I genuinely believe that was a crash of a UFO over Venezuela in 1996, and it was
what a trip.
It was it was really exciting talking to him and just piecing it all together. Now, obviously, we've only got his testimony, unfortunately, so it's like the opposite of Roswell. We've got literally hundreds of people talking about the incident and what took place and that sort of thing. With this, there's only his testimony. Now, he did reach out to his brother-in-law, but his brother-in-law refused to give comment, probably because he said it's probably because of his position and that sort of thing, and he's worried about the ridicule factor, which obviously stops a lot of people talking about the subject, unfortunately. And because Adrian has, of course, given his name, that would imply that people would be able to work out who the other witnesses were from that. So I kind of fully understand that. But it's a shame because I would have liked to get that other testimony on record. The other cowboys who were there at the time, unfortunately, Adrian did not keep in touch with them. And he lives back in the UK now, he's back in Devon, but he moved back. I can't remember the exact year he moved back, a number of years after the incident. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating.
That's a cool story.
It'd be interesting to group together to make your way into the jungle there. And they did actually go. He actually went back to the location a number of months later. He said once the monsoon has stopped, the area dried out, and he was able to actually drive out to the location. And they did a big search for the entire afternoon, looking around the area. Now, he said they never found any pieces, but he said that they could have been there because there'd been so much vegetation growth. There were kind of thick vines that had covered everything and dried over the top. So he said that the pieces could have been there, just lost in the jungle. They might be there right now, just sitting there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like-
I'm gonna take a trip out there one day. I'll be like, I'm gonna do a holiday. Yeah, my wife will be like, "Where do you want to go on holiday?" I'll be like, "I want to go to Venezuela." I want to go to this
jungle.
random specific area of jungle in Venezuela. So, why do you want to go there? Oh, no reason. No, it's by all accounts, it's quite a dangerous jungle as well. He sent me some photographs of sort of large anaconda snakes and tigers and all sorts of stuff.
Oh man,
Yeah.
no,
So
thank
we're
you.
talking about proper thick jungle. So yeah, but they could be there to this day for all we know. It's quite fascinating.
I'm on that.
I think that's the only UFO crash case I've had. I've had other cases where UFOs landed. I've dealt with some incredible cases where UFOs have come down and landed in front of people. But I think that's the only case I've ever had. Which there was another case which could have potentially been a crash or a landing. They never really saw it on the ground, so they didn't know whether the thing had crash landed or had landed specifically for a reason. But yeah. But that one definitely seems to be a crash by the way that it broke up into chunks and fell down into the ground. Absolutely fascinating.
It's really weird there wasn't smoke and there was fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fart
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah, it's really odd.
Floating, it should have made some kind of sound, right? Like,
It must
Oh,
be
yeah,
an
yeah.
interesting metal or whatever
Yes.
it was encased in.
whatever
Yeah, he did.
thing to power their vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. To move like that and just completely silently. Yeah. I mean, obviously it was 100 yards away, so it went right next to it. So maybe if they were closer, there might have been a low hum. Or in some cases I've investigated, there's a actually that reminds me of another case which I've got to go over in a minute. The low hum, actually, that's interesting. That actually links directly to this other case that I wanted to discuss with you. But yeah, so sometimes they seem to be silent, completely silent, and then other times sort of low hum is heard. But in that case, yes, seemed to be silent. But he did actually say that the pieces as well seemed to go down to the ground slightly slower than he thought they should have. But he couldn't tell because it was kind of in the distance. But he said it seemed to take longer than he expected for the bits to go down. They weren't floating down. We're not talking about bits of fabric that were blowing around or anything like that. He said it was definitely kind of solid chunks of whatever this thing was. But the fact that it broke up into pieces without making any sound and then hearing no explosion again is really bizarre. There's so many aspects to it. It's just weird.
Maybe it was like whoever was piloting it, like maybe it was segmented and they could make it release apart from each other. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, he said that the chunks looked more erratic than that. They definitely, they looked like broken pieces rather than anything structured, like it split apart on purpose. So it did look like it had literally broken into chunks, but it's just a bizarre case. But if the thing was moving way too slow for it to be a meteorite, because there's probably people thinking right now, oh, that was just a meteorite, and no, because they watched this thing for a number of minutes as it moved away slowly into the distance. Meteorites, as you know, are extremely fast. We'll just go and they'll be gone.
They don't.
So, yeah. And it definitely wasn't an aircraft in trouble. Like I say, because I spoke with them in depth about that, and they owned where they saw at the airstrip. They were well used to planes coming and going, helicopters coming and going. All of them absolutely gobsmacked by this thing. Definitely was not an aircraft in trouble or something like that. And he said that if it had been an aircraft in trouble, let's say it had been, and obviously none of the aspects really fit that, but let's say it had been, he said he would have heard about it. They would have reported that a plane had come down in the area. Probably he said that they would have even had people come out to the ranch to ask them questions about whether.
Oh, for sure.
And he said they didn't hear anything. So whatever it was. But I think with the other sighting from the pilots, San Fernando, and the sightings over the village, it's just incredible that we've been able to track where we think this thing went before it reached the ranch. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. I just wish I had more witnesses I could speak to, because of course it happened ages ago, and the only person who's come forward to it. Now the case report I've put out online, so maybe in due course somebody may see that and come forward. And that has happened a number of times, and I love it when that happens. It kind of makes me, because it takes a lot of work to put the case reports together sometimes, and I just put them out there just to get the word out about cases. I just put all the facts in there and maps and this sort of thing. And sometimes we've had other witnesses have come forward as a result of reading the reports, and that's absolutely brilliant when that happens.
That's really cool.
So this other case, this other case I was going to go over with you. Yeah, this with the low humming. So this is a really interesting one. It's again a close encounter. This one occurred in Canada, Nova Scotia, back in August of 1987. So most of the cases I investigate come from the UK, and obviously Adrian in the last case, it occurred in Venezuela, but he's since moved back to Devon. But I'll take in cases from anywhere in the world. We've actually even had some cases from Birmingham in Alabama, believe it or not. and people have got in touch with me. Sometimes over my mobile phone. They've actually rang my mobile phone number. And I'm like, you realise you're calling the UK from America. That's very expensive. And I've actually investigated cases from Birmingham, Alabama, which is brilliant. But anyway, yeah, this case came in from Nova Scotia, a place called Sydney in Nova Scotia. And it's a case I investigated right back in 2011. And it involves the death of one of the witnesses. So it's quite a serious thing. So what happened was there was two witnesses involved, and it was a friend of the witness who died who spoke with me about what had taken place and about what he was told by his deceased friend. I did reach out to the family. It was obviously had to be very, very careful with what was discussed and this sort of thing, and be really sympathetic towards what had happened. But it was a clear and sunny mid-afternoon in August of 1987, and they'd gone to a place called Lingen Golf and Country Club. The two witnesses just out there playing a game of golf, and all of a sudden they look across to the I think it was the northeast, and they just see these objects flying on in. Essentially, what they claimed to have seen was two domed discs, so a single dome on the top of the disc. They were pewter grey in colour. They appeared to have some round portholes or windows around the edge of the dome, and in the base of the objects, as they got closer, they could see a revolving white light, like a circle of revolving lights moving around the clockwise direction. So these objects were coming in. They were moving at not massive speed, just kind of sort of about the sort of speed a helicopter might fly at. And a moment after seeing them, they looked further away in the distance, and what they spotted was three military jets, CF-18 jets. They actually were able to identify the type of jet that it was. And these jets were moving on the same course as the discs and appeared to be attempting an interception of them. And they watched as these jets were flying quite a bit faster than the discs, so they're way in the distance. And the jets are getting closer to these discs. Now, as soon as they get within sort of range of these discs, all of a sudden the objects massively increase in acceleration and just essentially start moving much quicker their direction. Not like a bullet, but much faster than the jets have been moving. And they're coming right towards them now. And as they got nearer, they said they could feel the static electricity in the air, and they heard a low humming sound, clearly coming from the objects. Now, the objects were going to go right over their head, and as they get overhead of them, they stop dead in the air. So they're hovering directly above the two witnesses, almost like they're checking them out. I've dealt with some other cases where that exact same thing has been reported. So it looked like, who knows what that was for, but they essentially seem to be looking at them. So these two discs are right below them. They're just looking up, and they can see the underneath of them. And these jets are still on intercept. Once again, the jets start to get near, sort of approaching the edge of the golf course. At this moment, the two discs suddenly shoot straight upwards, make a vertical ascent, a right angle turn, and just zip away into the horizon. So, of course, very extreme maneuvers, putting out the question anything mundane, like any sort of remote control models or anything like that. And
Weather balloon. Yeah.
Weather balloons. yeah. Some vertical ascending, right angle turning weather balloons. That's absolutely it. So they're just gone like that, and these jets continue on the same path and just continue over the golf course and just head off in the direction these discs have shot away in, and that's the end of their experience. Now, the witnesses kept this to themselves at first. For whatever reason, maybe they were worried about the ridicule or thought that nobody would believe them. It's such a close encounter with some obvious UFOs, flying saucers, if you will. And maybe they thought that people were just going to laugh at them. But for whatever reason, they kept this to themselves. About 6 months later, one of the two witnesses developed leukemia, the blood disease. And soon after getting ill, he started to become more open about what had happened. He associated what had happened to him, his illness, with this close encounter, and he thought that his close encounter with these objects, the radiation or whatever from them, had caused this illness, and he was absolutely adamant that this was the reason. And he became very animated and would talk about it with all his friends and everything. Sadly, 6 months after that, he passed away from it. Now, looking into it, radiation exposure to radiation is one of the potential causes of leukemia. It's absolutely true. And right up to his death, both the witness and his family blamed his illness on this close encounter, which I think really sets it as a real event, really, because not only did he have the second witness, but the very fact that this guy was blaming this close encounter. I mean, why make up a story like that?
Yeah, you wouldn't.
When you're on death's door. He towards the end, he apparently, because I never got to speak with him, of course, only found out after the fact, but he apparently was deeply upset and wished he'd never had the experience. And he said, this has caused me, this illness that I'm now going to die of. And sadly he did. Now it's not a be all and end all, because there is other things that can cause leukemia. And one of those is smoking, and he was a smoker. So it's entirely possible that there's other medical reasons for why he caught that. So, but it's still, that aspect remains, and it's a possibility. Now, there are other cases on record where people have had radiation type burns off close encounters with craft, sunburnt skin, this sort of thing, and hair loss, and all sorts of things on record from different cases. So it does make you wonder whether that was related, but we can never prove it. But it's certainly a very interesting case, and it's the only case I think I've dealt with which has led to that. I've dealt with some other cases where people have talked about physical, especially the static electricity. That's quite a common one when there's objects in close proximity with people. Sometimes there's a static in the air, but not always. See, but the way I look at that is, if you look at the amount of different vehicles we've got here on the planet, let's say all our different planes, we know all the different types of shapes and sizes of planes, the different capabilities, the different way they're able to move. So why would the same logic not apply to another species that were visiting us? So sometimes people say, well, how come there's all these different hundreds of types of craft? And that's why, because just look at our own vehicles around Earth. And we've got hundreds of different types of shapes of planes. So.
And I'm sure there's more than one type of species.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, you've got that to take into account as well.
Yeah.
So with the contact cases, there's, so obviously the most common ones that are seen are the greys, classic aliens, large black eyes,
right?
And they've become classic because of that, because they're the most reported species. But I've dealt with many cases involving what I term Nordics. Other people may call them humanoids, Pleiadians, long blonde hair, very chiseled features. And they're seen almost as much as greys. But some people have this misconception that they were seen right back in the 60s and 70s a lot, and they're no longer seen. That's absolutely wrong. I've got many modern day contact cases where these beings are still seen and have interacted with people. Then you've got reptilians, so not as common, but I've still dealt with quite a lot of cases involving reptilian type beings. And then more rare mantid type insectoid looking creatures. Now, they all appear to be working towards common agendas. I've dealt with many cases where these species appear to be working with one another towards common goals. And there's some people have viewpoints that that particular species are evil or good or friendly or this sort of thing. And I think that's kind of it's quite a shallow view of looking at it, because if you take the human species, for example, we can be both monstrous and absolutely wonderful at once. Mm-hmm. So why would the same not apply? So I think there's probably different groups of these different species working towards different agendas, sometimes cooperating with one another, maybe in other cases working independently, but very, very complex.
Yeah.
Those are the main four types that I've seen in the case. I've investigated over 300 contact cases from around the world. In the majority of those cases, those four types / species have turned up. But then occasionally there's other things seen. In a few cases, there's been very, very short little chaps they commonly referred to as blue dwarfs. The Whitley Strieber case from America, in his case, he saw these beings, and they seem to kind of assist the greys. Are seen assisting the greys with abduction type experiences, and they're usually only about a foot, 1.5 foot high. But I've dealt with a few cases involving those, but they're very, very rare indeed, at least from the cases I've looked into. I might be swayed because a lot of the cases I've dealt with have been from around the centre of the UK, and it's entirely possible that you've got different types of contact occurring in different volumes at different locations around the planet.
Right.
Yep.
Like having different territories over the planet or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very hard to quantify on a global level because you've got all these different researchers all doing their own independent studies. Now, obviously, you've got some groups, MUFON, for example, the most famous large UFO group. Now, I could have, if I wanted to, become an investigator for MUFON. There was nothing stopping me doing that. But I really like the idea of being the investigator for a group that was local to me. So Birmingham UFO Group is where I live. And I started as a member and became an investigator, and then in due course the chairman. So I'm quite proud of that, and I like running the group and that sort of thing. But of course, it means that a lot of the cases I get are from around the Birmingham area or the Midlands. And the further you go afield, the less cases I've looked into. But it's very much a global thing. I think with the so-called UFO hotspots, I think that UFO hotspots could certainly exist. But I think that in some cases they're probably self-made in a way, because if more people report UFOs from a certain area, that makes more people look up at the sky. Therefore, there's even more sightings of UFOs, so they pile in on top. Then you've got people from outside, genuine hoaxers, who are trying to kind of be part of the party essentially and get in the papers. So they'll kind of make up experiences or over embellish things that have happened. And you put all this together, and lo and behold, you've got a hotspot. I could easily make Birmingham look like a hotspot if I was to go right now to any of the newspapers and I presented all the cases I've dealt with from around Birmingham over the last, since I think the oldest case I've done is from 1965, I think, from Birmingham. But if I took all those cases together and said, here you go, look at this, they'd be like, wow, Birmingham's a hotspot. But it's not, is it really? It only looks like a hotspot because I'm actively investigating around this area. I think if I was to move to a completely different city and do the same thing there, the same thing would occur because it's going on everywhere.
I would say anywhere there's not light pollution, look up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You'd be surprised what you see.
I think you just have to be in the right place at the right time. I think I could step outside right now and look up, and there might be a UFO right over the house. Or I might never see anything there. You just had to be lucky, really, to be at the right place at the right time. But there are some places, obviously, that where UFOs are seen multiple times. It's quite rare, though, that occurs. You sometimes get returning UFOs to certain areas. Interestingly, a while back, I put together a map of the different cases because I wanted to see where cases were occurring. Unfortunately, the website that I was creating this map on got shut down, and I lost a lot. It took hours and hours to put together as well. It was really good. So I've learned from that just to make sure that if it's something I'm doing, it's something that I'm creating from scratch. So
backing up your data.
Absolutely. But essentially, I had this map, and you could click on it, and it goes to the case reports. And I found out really fascinating things with that. So, for example, there was one particular area of Birmingham, in the outskirts of Birmingham. It was just a small cul-de-sac, and it turned out that 10 years apart, they'd had two completely independent flying triangle sightings, one at one end of the road and one at the other end of this little road. And then there weren't any sightings anywhere else in that area. And it does make you wonder whether it was the same craft returning there 10 years later and it'd been seen again. You know, like it was frequent in the area.
Yeah.
And we've talked about something local. We've actually got so Dudley is a town north of Birmingham, and there were quite a lot of flying triangle sightings that occurred around Dudley. They might still be going on, I'm not sure, but it got nicknamed by the papers the Dudley Dorito because it was a shape of a Dorito crisp. Yeah, so if you go on Google and you search Dudley Dorito, that's what will come up.
I'm going to have to look that up.
The papers were kind of assuming that it was the same object, and I'm saying, well, maybe, but more than likely multiple flying triangle sightings going on. So it's not necessarily just one object continuously staying in the area. It just looks like that because of the similarity in the shape. But I've dealt with many cases of flying triangle craft, one of the more commonly seen shapes, shall we say.
Would you say those are more likely terrestrial, like we made them, or do you think they're extraterrestrial?
I've dealt with
triangles.
I've dealt with some contact cases involving flying triangle craft where people have been abducted onto a flying triangle and have seen grays aboard.
Oh wow!
So and there's other cases as well, none that I've directly investigated, but I'm aware of other cases here in the UK where people have observed flying triangles on the ground with alien beings outside of them, picking up things off the ground and things. So there's and also, if you look at the capabilities of flying triangle craft, they've got exactly the same capabilities as dome discs or spheres or the other types that are seen. They can instantly vanish and appear. They can shoot straight upwards and accelerate instantly. So they've certainly got the same sort of capabilities as these other craft types. So I'd say there's definite evidence. And now maybe some of them are back engineered. I'm not saying that they've all got aliens aboard. There might be some of them might be being human flown. And then you've got taken things to a whole new, even more complex level. You've got MILABs, military abductions, which are actually quite rare here in the UK, but I've heard there's more of them stateside, that sort of thing, where people report people in military uniform working alongside alien beings when they've been taken. So it's really, which you could look at multiple different ways, of course. If you want to go down a very conspiratorial route, you can say it there. Yeah.
It takes a lot to shock me. I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, the thing that complicates things with the contact subject is all the unusual aspects of it, like screen memories, etc. Screen memories are particularly fascinating to me. In actual fact, I recently did a very detailed lecture on screen memories that I've been giving here in the UK. It's one of the aspects of contact which amazes me, and this is where the beings can change the appearance of either themselves or their entire craft, so the witness will remember something entirely different. Now, because they can do that, you don't know whether some of these MILAB cases are in actual fact the beings changing their shape to look like humans, not necessarily MILAB. So it kind of muddies the waters around what's going on with it. There's a case I investigated from Bicester, incredible contact case, repeat case, lots of experiences through the gentleman's life. And in his childhood, he had an interest in joining the military. He was big into soldiers and played with toy soldiers and sort of thing. And he had a number of childhood experiences where 3 American soldiers would walk out of his bedroom wall at night time. They'd step forward from light out of his bedroom wall, would walk round and stand by the side of his bed staring at him. And he'd be terrified of them, and he'd be too frightened to shout out or anything. He didn't think he was paralyzed, but he'd be too frightened to shout. And then after a minute, he'd black out, and when he'd come round, it'd be morning time, and they'd be gone. And that happened on a number of occasions. Now,
did he think they were materialized? Like, were they just were they solid?
Yeah, he said they looked completely solid, and they actually had American. He recognized them as American soldiers. Now, the interesting thing is, he was interested in joining the military. In actual fact, later on, he did serve a time in the armed forces. Now, was that Greys or other alien beings putting on a screen memory, making himself look like soldiers to be something that he'd recognise and be more familiar with? Maybe to try. I mean, he was still very frightened of them, but maybe they were trying to be less frightening. It's there's multiple views for what's going on with screen memory, so I don't want to oversimplify it. Because it could be down to trauma, it could be down to something that's being done on purpose by the beings, it could be physical shape shifting going on. There's all sorts of different explanations for even the screen memory phenomena alone, and I delved into that in depth recently. It's really interesting.
That sounds like we need to have another conversation.
That
would be fascinating
based off the information
to get into that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'd be able to tell you about
connection.
I'd be able to go over some other cases where screen memories have occurred. Obviously, we've been focusing more on the contact side of things there with that. So, but yeah, absolutely, more than happy to.
Super fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna cut us off now, but we're gonna definitely have to get back in touch with you and hear more of your fascinating stories.
Sure.
How would somebody get in contact with you or find your information?
Okay, so all the case reports for the cases we've gone over in the talk, and also literally hundreds more, they're all available to read on the Birmingham UFO Group website. That's www.bufog.com, BUFOG.com. If you go there and you go to the blog on the page, you'll find, and you can do a search as a search magnifying glass. You can type in particular locations or particular years and see what comes up. So they're all on there. There's also a sightings report form embedded in the website, so you can get in touch via that. So if you want to report an incident that you've had to go over. The email address to contact my group directly, Birmingham UFO Group @gmail.com. So pretty straightforward. We've got a Facebook organization page, which is your standard facebook.com/Birmingham UFO Group. And we've also got a community page where we talk between meetings. It's called BUFOG Truth Seekers. It's got over 1.3 thousand members at the moment. Anybody's welcome to join that. I'm the key admin of that group, and I won't stand for nonsense or belittling of people. So it's an open place where people can actively talk about the subject. We're fine with talking about other elements of the paranormal as well as just UFOs in there. But people can ask questions, post blogs, videos, whatever they want in there. I've also got a UFO themed card game, which I've worked on, believe it or not. This has been an ongoing project of mine, and it's going into commercial release within a few months. We're just doing the final packaging, and I'm gonna it's probably going to go on Amazon. Essentially, for a number of years, I've wanted to build, to design my own game themed on the UFO subject. And so we're working on it behind the scenes. The game's called UFO Wave. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's got cartoon artwork by a genuine experiencer from New York, who I actively sought down to do the art for the game. He was more than happy to do the artwork for it. And in the game, you actually play as alien species. So you're actually playing as the Greys or as the Nordics or whatever, and sort of trying to avoid the military and the Men in Black and do these activities. It's for 1 to 6 players, and it's suitable for older children as well as adults. I've got an 11-year-old daughter, and I wanted her to be able to enjoy the game. But I'm quite proud of it. And yeah, it's coming to the final stages. The main website where you can find out details on that is ufowavegame.com. If you go there, you'll find full playthroughs. You'll find videos of me describing aspects of the game. You can see the animated advert for it, all sorts. And you can subscribe to that website. And then when it launches commercially in a few months, you'll be able to purchase it if you wish.
I'm definitely signing up for that. I can't wait. That sounds amazing.
It's certainly the most authentic card game on the UFO subject that's ever been created. It
sounds incredible.
It's
yeah, no, it sounds so cool.
I'm excited for the release.
I always like to play the bad guys. So.
Yeah.
Would that be great?
Reptilian one.
Right. Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll be talking to you soon and looking for your...
Uh-oh. Lost you, Christy.
Well, we appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Lovely chatting with you.